I'd like to call to order the August 14th, 2023 school board meeting of the Brandywine Heights Area School District. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Brunner, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Eisner,
Here.
Mr. Hefner,
Mr. Hefner is Mr. Hefner is not able to make it this evening. He's feeling ill.
Mr. Hohenschel,
Here.
Mrs. Hume, Mr. Reitnauer,
Here.
Mr. Sheets,
Here.
Mr. Stubitz,
Here.
Mrs. Walliser,
Mrs. Waller is away on vacation,
Mr. Wagaman,
and Mr. Wagner is away on vacation.
5 present.
Recognitions.
So this evening we have an obituary minute is for Emery Meck. Emery served in the school district as a maintenance coordinator. So if you don't mind, board, I would like to read this obituary minute. Whereas the board of directors of the Brandywine Heights Area School District acknowledges the passing of a dear friend in education, Mr. Emery Meck, on June 16th, 2023. Whereas Mr. Emery Meck served the district with dedication and excellence as the director of maintenance and maintenance coordinator for a total of 25 years prior to his retirement in 2004. Whereas Emery Meck's commitment to lifelong learning, devotions to students, and records of excellence in education and community endeavors will long be remembered and appreciated. And whereas his passing is marked by a deep sense of loss to his family and friends in the district, and whereas the Brandywine Heights Area School Board would like to publicly recognize the extraordinary life and record of service of Emery Meck, now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the Brandywine Heights Area School District officially honor Mr. Emery Meck for his role in improving the lives of countless students and citizens through his contributions to education, public service, and his family and the community. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of the school district this 14th day of August 2023, with a copy being sent to his bereaved family. We can just have a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a presentation.
No presentation?
Nope, no presentation tonight. Any public comment relative to the agenda items? Moving on to the board of directors report. Could I have a motion and a second?
Motion right now. Second.
Thank you. I heard a second. I wasn't sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we have a couple items. Hello, Mrs. Hune. We have a couple items under the board of directors report. The first one is the acceptance of the school board meeting minutes from June 12th. And then if you remember, we also had that short meeting on July 24th for the pre-K. So those both meeting minutes are on there this evening. Any corrections or updates have to be made to those meeting minutes? Okay, none being heard. We have some policies to go over this evening, and I thought I just might take a moment to go through some of these just to share with the board what some of these policies mean. So there's first reading policies, the 000, 001, 2. Those are all policies relative to the school board and the operations of the school district. No changes to those. Those are just routine review. When we get to 003, that's a functions policy. That actually talks about how the school district sets up policies, what we're going through. And there was a section in there about second reading policies. And the wording was something to the effect of if there was anything beyond a minor change to the policy, that we had to start the whole process all over. So we removed that because I think our process is working pretty well. We have our first reading. We have a chance to have any suggestions, edits. We can make those for the second reading and then they're approved. So that's the only really piece that was taken out in that policy. There's a slew of home education policies. And so those are the ones I just want to take a couple minutes to just go over so everyone understands really what home education is and what rights they have, what obligations we have as a school district. So the first thing just to go over is if a family is going to be a home educated family, they have to let us know by August 1st. And basically they have to have someone that's a supervisor oversee that curriculum and oversee the education plan for that child. They have to submit that curriculum to the school district, and then they have the opportunity to borrow any textbooks, any supplies that we have in the school district, they have access to. There is some additional benefits, and that really is what leads us into some of the other policies. So then we get into the extracurricular policy. That policy and what that's saying is that home education students have the same rights as a regular education student to participate in any extracurricular activities. If there is a sports team, for instance, and there is cuts that have to be made, that student has the exact same ability to be on that team, to be present as a regular ed student. So that's really kind of the extracurricular participation side of it. The tweaks to that now is that we are able to put verifications in, like academic records or attendance or weekly grades. That's the language that was actually added to this policy, as well as there's now an obligation on the school district side to post all those opportunities that are available to co-curriculars or extracurricular activities available for students. So if there's like clubs that the school district offers, a German club or SAG club or FBLA, or it's the sports side of it, they have the opportunity to participate in both. And so we just have to make sure that that's publicly available. And that is in our student handbook. So that checks the box there. So that's the updates to the policy there, and kind of the rights of the students to be able to do that. The next one, participation in academic courses. That one is it's co-curriculars and academic courses. Really, co-curriculars fall under these extracurricular activities. They kind of go hand in hand. The academic one is a unique one. So this is a brand new policy. It's the PSBA recommended policy, but this one in particular is focused on the ability for a student to come in and take classes. So we had this in our policy before. The difference is that when they did it, it was based off of any enrollment and if we had any seats available left. And if we did, sure, you can come in and kind of basically audit the class if you think about it from a college perspective. Now it is that they can come in and participate in, I think it's a quarter of the school day. So that quarter of the school day then really gets broken out, and there's some safeguards in this policy for the school district. So that quarter of the school day, if they don't have transportation, has to be consecutive. So they can't come in, then do another, let's just say they come in third period and then have another course fifth period. They can't do that because it's not going to be the school district's responsibility to oversee them and wait for them almost to be childcare until the next period starts. If they have their own transportation, sure, they can come for third period, leave, come back for fifth period, but it's not our responsibility to oversee or supervise that child. So that's the academic side of it. There is a transportation component in here. So if they're coming in the morning or coming and leaving in the afternoon, they can participate in the district's transportation, but we're not going to offer special transportation. So if it's part of the normal routine, sure, but otherwise no. So that's the academic courses. And then there's one that is similarly connected to that, and that's participation in BCTC. We historically haven't had that, but just within the last 4 or 5 years, we had a couple students that were home education and then wanted to participate in BCTC. So there's now a policy that's connected to that. This is a PSBA recommended one, and this is connected directly. I was able to connect with our BCTC and make sure all the policy components in here match with what their criteria are for accepting students into the BCTC program. So that, again, it matches if one of our Brandywine students go to BCTC or a home education student from Brandywine goes to BCTC, those acceptance criteria match what the BCTC acceptance criteria is. So it's one of those things that you probably don't intersect too much about. Obviously, we hear a lot about home education in different realms and facets, but there is a slew of laws and policies that are connected to that. And I thought it might be good just for you to have that edification of knowing what goes into that. So any questions on those? Okay. Second reading policies, really no changes from some last time unless there are any suggestions or edits. And then the last item on here is to ratify the 4th and 5th Amendment of the agreement of sale with East Penn Manufacturing. So this was, if you remember from the June meeting, we were supposed to wrap this thing up. It didn't get wrapped up when they did the title search. Unfortunately, there were some things that were uncovered. And so it delayed the process of signing. Everything's been board approved by Longstone Township. Everything on our end is done. It's now just waiting for East Penn Manufacturing to kind of clear their piece of it. We are racing the clock though, because there's only 60 days from when Longstone Township approved it to when it has to be recorded with the Berks County and then get back to Longstone Township. So we are fighting the clock here. But as of today, we received notification that we think we're just about there. And by the end of the week or next week, we should have this thing wrapped up. So that's where we are with that. I'll turn it back over to you for committee reports.
Good. Thank you. Under committee reports, Berks County Intermediate Unit, Mrs. Hume.
Hi, good evening. The BCIU Board of Directors does not meet in the month of July, so I don't have an update, but the next meeting is this Thursday night, the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. BCTC, Mr. Sheets.
BCTC also did not have a meeting in July. Our next meeting is coming up. I believe it's the 23rd. Of course, I can't find my calendar right now. It is the 23rd, and that will be at the East Campus. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Berks Earned Income Tax Bureau Committee, Ms. Del Greco.
So the committee met on June 29th. The meeting was short. Honestly, not a lot of items relative to us as a district. They really focused on, well, they did elect a new president and vice president as business managers had shifted out of the county, so they're not able to serve in those roles. But the solicitor was really focusing on the business privilege tax program and the prosecution of delinquent accounts, notably EIT. We don't offer business privilege tax. We don't have that program within our district, so that was not relevant to us. The next meeting will be in September.
Okay, thank you. COLA.
May I ask a quick question? Is there a philosophy or a reason why Brandywine doesn't? I know several districts in the county do, and from a personal experience, it was like 0.0075% of the business's sales. So it wouldn't generate hundreds of thousands, but it might generate tens of thousands. Any history around the table on that?
Not that I know of. It actually has never really come up. So maybe we're something investigating.
I mean, I can speak again from experience. Exeter has the business privilege mercantile tax of that amount that I just specified. Amity Township, as an example, does not. So that would be Amity is Daniel Boone, Exeter obviously is Exeter. So those are just two of the 18 examples. I don't know what everybody else does district-wise, but again, this district is hurting for revenue. We're also hurting for businesses, but it's not so sizable a tax that I don't think it would discourage any business that wanted to put up a name tag here from pursuing business opportunities in our community.
Yeah, so it's always something that we can look into. I don't know for sure, but I think it's my understanding that one of the municipalities within our district would also have to be on board. So I'm not sure of that, but I would have to double check into that because I know a lot of them tends to be the district and then some municipality within that district. But
Worth looking
Let's
into.
look into it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. COLA. Did you have?
A couple updates here. Our next meeting is going to be September 12th. There really are no other updates because there was no meetings this summer. Under policy committee, obviously, we went through those policies this evening with the first reading policies that I just reviewed.
Okay. Strategic planning and goals, we'll have a update later on in the meeting. And then negotiations and compensation, I believe, I don't know if Mr. Sheets has an update, but I believe there was no update for this as well.
That is correct. Alexis, there is no update.
Okay. The building construction committee.
So there's been a lot of updates with the building construction committee. That we actually had 4 meetings over the course of the summer, 3 with our architect firm, Artera, and then 1 additional one that was internal. And so I thank Alexis, Brian, Ken, and Mike for engaging in that and helping kind of lead that path. What I thought I'd do this evening is just spend a couple minutes going through so the board kind of has we did this last meeting, but it's just to give a little bit of an update of kind of where we're at. So this is our existing high school. This is our existing field. When you drive in, there's this parking lot that kind of we call the student parking lot or the athletic one. And then there's this one, which is more of our bus field parking lot. The problem with this facility is that it was laid out stupid. It is not conducive to having all our fields in one area. And I'll show you why in a second. So just bear with me. Next slide. So you can keep going down. We evaluated seating. Right now, this is the current plan, the most recent rendition of where we are. So the biggest issue why I talked about layout is if this building would have been here or this building would have been down at the bottom, it would have freed up this entire space for athletic fields. Right now we have fields kind of all over. When you do throwing events, you need a massive area to do throwing events. There was literally 3 areas on this entire property that we could do throwing. This was the one. The first rendition was to do it here and actually throw in the middle of the field while track was running, which we quickly denied because obviously that's a major safety concern. And then the third option was to do it down on the field hockey field down below here. And so that wasn't really a great option because field hockey is, we're trying to preserve that field as much as possible. One of the field hockey contingent big concerns right now is to be able to have a turf field. Obviously, we're not going that direction with a turf field. We're going more of a grass. So we're trying to preserve that area as much as possible. And the issue is if you do throwing events and they're down on this side and you have events up here, your majority of your track events here, obviously there's a pretty big space divide for your referees as well as your coaches. So that really wasn't an ideal location. So it forced us into this location. And this is kind of the layout right now. This is a practice field for soccer. And then this is our softball field with a temporary fence. What we're looking to do is make this a permanent fence with a warning track, make our javelin with the runway this way to get enough distance. This would be shot put, and then this would be discus coming this way. This allows us to use this venue. And then what we would do is take this practice field that's here and slide that into this area. It's going to be a little bit narrower than what it is now, but it gives us some practice field to take that pressure off of this when it's just practices and not game events. From a facility perspective, I think we've come to a pretty good consensus on this facility. There will be a fence around the entire track that will have a 4 to 6 foot walking path around it, so a pretty nice size walking path. Obviously, a synthetic track going around here. You can see it's 2 sizes. There's this one and there's this one. When you do track events, there's a lot of students that participate more in the sprints, and so the idea is to have an 8-lane sprint track that would go up to here. So from your 200 events down to your 100s and those sort of things, those would all be able to do it on 8-lane. And then your long distance runs, there's not as many students, so that would drop down to a 6-lane track. It's a way to kind of curb some cost and kind of meet the needs of what our students would be participating in the track event. This would be for your high jump. This would be for your pole vault, and then this would be for your long jump. And then we would have new lights that would be put in. Right now, there's no lights over there at all, and so we'd be putting new lights in. From a seating perspective, right now there are about, if I remember, 350-ish. Does that sound about right? 350 seats. We're targeting between 600 and 800. And the idea behind that is the biggest event that we have on record last year is just over 500. So we want to make sure we have enough capacity. And we also want to make sure that if we ever have the opportunity to hold graduation here, that we can have enough capacity to hold graduation with having tickets and all those other things that kind of are restricted. So that is a long-term goal. We'd like to get towards that 800 to be able to have a little bit more flexibility. The other piece that we're looking to do here is add a little bit of a seating area with a picnic table, platform, plaza type scenario. This is the snack stand that's currently there. So this snack stand is this whole bump out here. That services the gym for snacks, but also has a rolling gate that has a window to service the outside. That really has never been used or very infrequently. And so by having a little bump out with picnic tables, it's a very nice transition there. There's a handicap accessible area right there already. And then we would be looking to do a press box in concert with the seating area there. Right now, this is bathroom facilities. And so you would have that. And then we also have bathroom facilities in here. So that should help from a permitting perspective, take care of bathrooms. The other piece that we spend a lot of time on, Carly, can you go back up to the big picture one, the first slide? As she scrolled up, the big piece that we spent a lot of time on was how are we going to access the facility? If you remember, the first idea was that we were going to make a driving path and have a loop like this. There would be a loop back here. Obviously, with throwing, that can't happen, but even if we did do it, it was a couple $1 million to just make that path, which is not within our budget. So we started looking at making an actual walking path back here like this. We also looked at exploring kind of forcing our parking this way and making a walking path this way and having a ticket stand back here. And you have the idea of some sports here, you have an entrance there. It looks good on paper, but when you stand back here and look back here, this is all the receivings. There's dumpsters back here. There's a big oil tank back here. It's almost like you're bringing people in the back door, and it just doesn't look nice. So we decided not to do that, and we decided that we're going to use the parking. And it's going to take a lot of signage. It's going to take some retraining of our own community members as well as visiting ones, but to use the inside of the building, just like they would use this corridor to get to the gym, be that same idea. Use this corridor, but just go the extra steps. I mentioned earlier, this is that snack stand, so it's just one long shot. Bring people back here, and the neat part is as you walk through here, it opens up and it's kind of like not a wow factor, but it's open up. There's a new stadium. Everything is right in front of you. So the biggest drawback to that is obviously bringing people through a building. So there are security gates that are within the different corridors of the building. We're looking to do some work to upgrade those or to find ways to make them so that it's a little bit more not having what's that?
Eye pleasing.
Eye pleasing. Thank you. Very, very good term. So that's the current plan from a community member getting to the facility pathway instead of coming this way or this way. It one saves cost, and two, I think it's the best way from a aesthetic standpoint to get people into the building.
It allows us to highlight our alumni, like the new stuff in the building as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you haven't been to the gym lately, right here in this corner, there's a really nice touchscreen alumni center there. It has all kinds of spotlights and highlights of different past individuals that have won awards as alumni. There's a really neat student wall there. So our idea, and Mrs. Kleinfeld and I have been talking about this already, is to kind of really market that and brand that whole area and make it a very Brandywine welcoming entrance corridor there. Did I miss anything, Alexis, Brian?
Just the fencing too that we're gonna, so we kind of strategically push them through there so they can't get around.
Yeah.
So, but that's all.
So we're looking to put a fence as that softball outfield gets put here, put a fence here. That's twofold. One, as Alexis said, to move people that way, but also as a safety precaution. So as javelin's throwing this way, we don't want people walking through there. And so it blocks people and kind of brings them that way. Thoughts, initial reactions to that?
How do the doors get locked after the event's over? Is that like on a timer and just locked, or is someone assigned that job? How's that?
It's a keyed lock right now. Yeah. The doors in the front are on an automatic system, kind of like the key card system. But when there's events that are happening, they're obviously open so that people can come in, community members can come in. But then at a certain time when those events are done, the custodian knows to go in and unlock that or to lock that up for the evening. So that would be the similar to what we do now.
So, couple of things.
Yeah.
One, thank you to the team. I know this is it's a huge project for the district and for the community, and there's a lot of opinions swirling around it, and this is big work. And frankly, it's probably none of our core competency. It's not what we do for a living, and so we're being asked to stretch in ways that sort of make us vulnerable. So thank you for investing time and energy. Couple of just very tactical questions. Do you want to go down?
Do you want to go down to the new slide?
Yeah. I
Okay.
guess that'd be fine. So, just following up on the safety security issue and the door locking thing.
Yeah.
So for events, makes sense to me that things would be unlocked in advance and that we can channel folks through. For practices and just day-to-day usability, what is the vision for that backfield? Is it going to be sort of locked down and kept pristine just for game days? Or is it going to be used as a practice field for soccer and whatever other track and field and whatever other events?
For track, it would be used for practice as well as competition. For soccer, it's going to be a mix of both. We'll have this practice field. We're going to try to use this as much as possible, but you will have times when the girls and the boys teams may be practicing at the same time. And so if that's the case, we may have to use the actual playing surface for practices as well. Now we do have that field that's down here. There's that when you first come in between the two parking lot areas. This area right here as a secondary practice field that could be used. Obviously a little bit farther away from I think where you were going from a security question. What we normally do for practices is we'll lock the facilities for practices. The trainer's out there and kind of has access to let kids in and out, or the coach lets kids in and out. The same thing happens here. Like the end of the building here stays locked because we have intermittent students and kind of limiting that traffic flow.
Practically, I just encourage folks to really think granular about what it looks like for the families and the student athletes and those coaches and trainers, because kids do come late from time to time to practice for very legitimate reasons, doctor's appointments and other things, after school academic priority activities. And so if you've got the adults, coaches and trainers in the back of the school, and you've got the access to them from the front of the school, those doors have to remain open, or you're allocating a staff member to be a door watcher for at least 15, 20, 30 minutes after the start of a practice. That is not practical, in my opinion. We don't have enough coaches to do that, and that's not their job. They need to be teaching and coaching. So it means, in my vision, that those doors need to remain open, which historically anyway has been a big bone of contention with folks. So there's this balance of accessibility versus security, and those are real issues. And at least heretofore, they have not been fully solved. And I don't hear a plan yet, and it may be a little early for that level of granularity, but if you don't talk about it now, we'll miss our opportunity potentially to really solve it in the best way. Which leads to the next question, which is around coaching input. So certainly helpful for the board to see this. We're going to be asked to support it and vote on it at the appropriate time. Has every coach been given this presentation and had the opportunity to weigh in with questions, with suggestions, with ideas about how this vision of ours impacts them and their teams, both from a game day and a practice perspective?
Yeah. And so to take that one step further, I also think it's important to connect with our community
Absolutely.
and our kids. And so we actually have an event we're tentatively planned for October 10th. And the idea is to get people into the facility, go through a presentation like this. The reason we're waiting until the 10th is obviously the start of school year. We didn't want to tag team then. And then there's still some details that are getting flushed out. So can you scroll down again, please? Back and forth. You should have just had 2 slides up. The idea is that we would have everyone in the auditorium and then have people actually walk through and then have kind of these slides, but renditions of what it's going to look like here, renditions of what the field's going to look like, renditions of what the hallway is going to look like with QR codes or some kind of way to give feedback. And so people can give feedback about this. People can give feedback about security entrance, those sort of things. People can give feedback about the seating. People can give feedback about the field area. So there'll be strategic areas where we can gather a lot of input and feedback and make those changes. We've been assured that any changes or suggestions that come out of that meeting can still be incorporated into the plan, because the plan really is going to be driven at land development and water. And so unless we're going to change the field or change complete concept, we can make any of these other small changes that or suggestions that would come up.
Okay.
Big field, big.
Yeah, again, it's a tough balance. So it's like an input session.
Yep.
Versus a rollout sales session.
Mhm.
The input session obviously has to come as early in the process as possible, because you do get too far down the path if folks don't like it or really object to it, or if the team has missed some critical thing.
Absolutely.
It happens sometimes. It can't be too late to incorporate good ideas and suggestions.
Yeah.
So to me, that's two very different input versus rollout kinds of conversations with a much broader audience. But I wouldn't wait until October to talk to the coaches. If this is now public information, it's a public board, and the coaches haven't seen this, that concerns me. And if I were a coach, I'd be going like, I'm a soccer coach and no one asked me if having a practice field over there is okay. Or I'm the softball coach and no one asked me if putting a fence around a field that for the past 20 years and X number of state championship teams, nobody asked for my input. I'd be darn disappointed or upset. So I really encourage the team to start talking to the coaches that are primarily impacted. Basketball, volleyball might not be impacted as much. I'd still get their feedback.
Yeah.
But gosh, the softball coach, the
Girls
soccer coaches,
boys soccer, yep.
the folks who are using these spaces that you just spent a lot of time talking about absolutely need to have the chance to weigh in and invite.
Yeah, fair.
Locker room access. Can you talk about that?
So this currently is there's concrete areas here with grass in between. We're going to put a cold concrete area in here so that there's nice flow back and forth here. These are the bathrooms, as I mentioned. Where these gray lines are right now, that's old concrete. That'll get changed out, but it's actually a good visual because this is the girls' locker and that's the boys' locker. So there is locker access. In addition, there's locker access this way to come in.
Okay, and obviously locker access from the inside of the building down.
Yeah,
the
that's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a door, an exterior door.
Yeah.
This is where the trainer is now. That would allow you to come in this way and in, or you come in this way.
Right, but from the front of the building, you also have access.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought
Okay.
my concept was if they're in a game.
Yes,
And one of
both.
those lockers,
It's both.
right.
Yeah, it's visiting team gets off the bus at the bus loop.
Yep.
And marches through the building to the back of the building by the gym and accesses the locker rooms, takes the field.
Yep.
Then they need to change clothes or whatever. They come in from the back of the building to access the locker room again.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the track field, does the vision include whatever is required for us to be able to host district and state competitions?
Yes.
So are we in compliance so that we can start to, again, generate maybe some revenue and certainly some visibility by hosting events
giving our kids to play, the opportunity to play on home field.
It does. So without a synthetic turf field, the reality is it probably will not be used for that sort of thing because a synthetic turf field is typically what's used for those sort of events.
For soccer.
For soccer. From a track perspective, if we were going to, our vision and our thought is there's a lot of different competitions at the high school level that are already existing that are specialty weekend type tournaments that happen with track. So that niche is already scratched. The middle school though is a prime area where we feel like we can capture some of that audience and hold events and bring teams together. So this would absolutely, it's a PIAA regulated track, so that would absolutely be feasible to have that. The only downside would be is we don't have an 8-lane for the distance. That would be the downside of having a 6-lane for the distance. But that would, he didn't give us a number, but I'm going to ballpark and say about 100 to 200,000 addition.
Yeah, it was 90,000 extra to add the 8
Just to
lane
do
from
the-
6 lanes. So
Yeah, I'd say
imagine
right around 100.
I managed another 90. Yeah, at least.
So say 100,000, you host 10 meets. I would think you could easily generate income over 10 meets, 2 meets a year, 5 years. You've raised $100,000.
Right.
So
If I could just interject that point. So the Berks County Track and Field organization has been set for about the next 20 years. That certain dates occur at certain times occur, the fire gate, chain meet. Those invitationals are set yearly and they don't change. Not saying that we couldn't host an invitational. However, the track invitationals in this area are not things that typically change. I think we would have a very difficult time wrestling schools away from those established track meets. Where we could look to host types of invitationals are things that are called last chance meets. So what a last chance meet is students who are looking to qualify for districts but haven't reached those qualifying heights or distances or times will often participate in a meet on Saturday morning. There's no fanfare, there's nothing, extravagant about it. The students will go there, they'll run it as a typical PIAA track meet, which is 6-lane track is acceptable for, as a way to, hopefully get that district qualifying time so they can compete in those postseason events. Is that a revenue generator for a school district? It is. It's not a major one. Typically, school districts would pay by student athlete would they be entering into this. But I think the reality is getting into the track invitational market in Berks County will be challenging, even with University of Oregon Reforms track, just because the market is so, or the calendar is so set, and those meets don't typically change.
helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think it's good feedback though, and I think something that we can look at and see what the cost is from Arctera, what that would be.
Yeah, I think anything we can do to monetize this
Mhm.
and design it and implement it in a way that we can leverage it fully.
Yeah.
Not just for our student athletes and our coaches and our athletic program and the community, but also as a way to drive revenue and bring visibility. And you bring visibility by hosting, by inviting people, and in many cases having them pay to use your facility. So everything's going to be brand new. In theory, everything's going to be state of the art. Let's monetize it.
It is something that Arctera has talked about with us, and we've gone down that path exploring. So it's not something we're not forgetting, and we've talked about it. So, but I think those dollars we're putting into certain areas, we've gone through a lot of meetings to shave those dollars into different categories. So we did discuss the 8 lanes versus 6 lanes, and that's why we did the 8-lane sprint track, because we decided it was beneficial. So
So
The other thing you mentioned, community, all the lights will have almost like we have out here, we'll have a dimmer, and so we'll have that so it can be on a low setting, so it'll be on for the community then to be able to use that in the evening hours. So I thought it was a nice feature, and this facility out here gets used heavily.
So in the direction, Andrew, of where you just pointed, so the quote unquote visitor side, so there's no
Yeah.
seating over there.
Right.
So where, as we expand seating, how do you manage visitor versus home? Because typically these fields have seating on both sides.
Right.
Yeah, much smaller on the far side and less fancy because that's where you put your non-home team, right?
So what we'll end up doing is we'll end up having to put signage up for as we put the bleachers in
Okay.
for visitors at home.
I think, we talked a lot about that other side and what to do but I think we didn't want to permanently put anything in case of expansion or something that would tie us down. But we are exploring lots of options for seating, and some of them are new and some of them are to reuse existing. So being able to move seating around is a thought we had, but we didn't want to tie in anything permanent on that side in case something came up that we wanted to expand over there. It gives us the opportunity.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
There was a rendition with seating that was over there, but then the other awkward thing was getting people around to it.
Yeah, so at minimum, I would think some kind of temporary small, so that a coach can put their team, 20 soccer players, sit down here, I need to have a team meeting quick. Or there's an injury and you need a handful of people, and so instead of taking up field, laying on wet grass, you can sit on a bleacher and, put a butterfly on a laceration on a head or something.
yeah, well, team seating isn't also pictured here, so that's something that we have planned for. It's just not drawn in. So
Oh, okay.
that's
there is
it's
some-
not part of the rendition. We're probably going to do that on our own.
Yeah,
It's
well-
not something we.
We'll have to get some mats to put over this so it doesn't ruin the track. When kids are sitting on the going like this with their spikes, but that will have team seating that's there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We talked about safety and security and building access. And I mean, clearly it seems that the decision or the very strong recommendation around the decision for not supporting a turf field has been made. I think it would be helpful, given the continuing buzz around that this summer. And I think there's a valid concern that we would be an oddball still. So to me, there's some value in being unique, but I'm not sure that this is one of those situations where being unique and being the only district in the county, if that's a correct fact, I'm not 100% sure of that, but maybe I should say one of few in the county that has a grass field for soccer. I don't know that that's a good thing. I think that's a disadvantage for our athletes. So it might be helpful to have some kind of, here's a spec sheet, pros, cons. These are the facts around the county and around the district. These are the schools that have turf and when they got it and what what the big issues have been, both good and bad.
Mhm.
These are the schools remaining that have invested continuing in grass fields. And these are their advantages and disadvantages, so that it's in black and white, so that folks who are still on the fence, I'm not sure this is the best decision or not, or I'm really against grass, they at least have a cheat sheet in writing to help them think that through.
Correct. Yeah, it's a great suggestion. We're working on that for that public meeting to make sure that everything is clearly articulated out.
I think there's a lot of folks who have opinions about this, but many of us are uneducated about it. And so the more the team in your design work and in your rollout work, in your input sessions and your rollout work, has documentation to help educate folks about this kind of field design, I think it would be really valuable.
There's a playability perspective. There's a unique facility perspective, like what does our land look like compared to someone else's. There's obviously a cost perspective. And
Maintenance,
so
Maintenance and upkeep.
upfront
That's-
cost and then maintenance costs.
Yeah.
Years ago, I remember someone in the auditorium downstairs when this stuff was talked about way many years ago when we started talking about a plan for facilities across the district, someone raised health concerns about turf. In terms of chemicals, all of that stuff should be documented.
Injuries, yeah.
Yeah, so that folks are equally educated, rather than having these random tidbits thrown out that that are alternative
Sound
facts. Yeah.
I just feel like we've come together with a lot of different ideas and the dollars we have and the needs that we have. We meshed the most we could do together, I think.
So we want to give you a kind of an idea of what this thing looks like, an idea of what the plan is. That idea of you kind of walk in and have not an entirely new space, but a new space here, a rehab space there, some repurposing of some fields on this side. Still some work to do, but we felt we were at a point where we were starting to get to a consensus to be able to share this out and give you guys some ideas of what this is going to look like. So, sorry I hijacked the meeting. was not my intention, but I figured it was a good opportunity to share that during committee report. Thank you.
All right. Any other board discussion so far? Other comments? Okay. And I'm sorry, Shadeen, I called you Miss Brunner earlier. Mrs. Kleinfelter, could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hillenschultz? Mrs. Hume?
Yes.
Mr. Reitner?
Yes.
Mr. Sheets?
Yeah.
Mr. Subitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Eisenhart?
Yes. Okay.
6 yeas, motion passes.
Business and operations report. May I have a motion and a second, please?
Motion right now.
Second, stupid.
Still Greco.
So solutions, not just a one-off daily basis. Drivers, so we currently have 31 drivers, which will get us through beginning of the school year. They have increased their marketing campaign as far as hiring drivers, so we'll see where that goes, but we do have a full set of drivers.
Other than Mr. Work and I driving like we did last year.
Any board discussion?
I have a question on F3, the Ole Valley District Ag program for that one student. So looking at the contract, there's no mention, or maybe I missed it, of cost. What do we incur a cost, or is there a cost transfer?
There is a cost.
It's about 17,000.
Okay, is there a reason it's not in the documentation?
So the state actually determines it.
Okay,
So honestly, Ole can't set the rate, and we can't really have that discussion. So probably in the agreement, it says per probably the PDE tuition rate. So they essentially annually reset the tuition rates that one district would pay to another. And it's set by elementary versus secondary. And that's what we go off of. So say if we had this agreement in place for 10 years, it would just go off that annual tuition rate.
and on the flip side, are there any unique programs like that Brandywine has that school districts like Ole and Fleetwood and Kutztown and others don't, that we could do the same thing?
So,
Pick up a handful of students and again generate some revenue spread across the same fixed cost.
so the reason that they're able to do that with the ag program is because it's labeled as a CTC. So it's essentially the exact same thing as what BCTC does. The ag program falls under the same rules and regulations. So if a student wants to go to an ag program, we have to allow that to happen. We cannot stop them from doing that. That's really the only program that's classified. There's a whole host of programs under BCTC. If they have a program, we can't replicate it. But if there's something else that would fall under a CTC that BCTC doesn't have, and we would be able to create it, then that would be a way to essentially monetize it or to attract students into it.
And that's really what I'm asking. I'm not suggesting we replicate PCTC stuff or compete in ag with Ole.
Yeah.
By no, I'm saying, what other opportunities, what are we good at uniquely that other schools haven't been able to get as good at?
So that, and the trick is it has to fall under the CTC umbrella. And so there's, from the program, obviously we have a lot of neat things. We have the computer science pathway. We have the Project Lead the Way engineering pathway. There's a lot of things that
Virtual Academy.
the virtual, but they don't fall under the Virtual Academy. Would kind of be its own. Those other two don't fall under that umbrella of a CTC.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be like an Ole student says, I want to go to the Project Lead the Way up at Brandywine. They would not really be able to, unless there was a separate agreement that was made, they wouldn't be allowed to come up here under the CTC umbrella because it's not a CTC program. That's what allows this student or other ag students to go to Ole, because we have to allow that. We can't stop it. So I hear what you're saying from the monetizing it.
Yeah. So you
But-
mentioned Project Lead the Way.
Yeah.
I think we're one of three. Maybe I'm wrong again with my statistics. But we're one of a handful of school districts in the county that offer Project Lead the Way. Is there any way to?
Unfortunately, we're not able to accept students from other school districts because we offer a program such as Project Lead the Way that they do not. Where the challenge comes into with ag and Ole is that, as Mr. Potter was sharing, that it's a CTC program. So it would be like if a student who goes here wants to go to BCTC, we allow them to go to BCTC. Being that BCTC doesn't have an agriculture program, students who want to pursue agriculture can then go to a program that does have an ag program like Ole. But the only time school students are able to jump a school district for that is to go to a CTC program. So Project Lead the Way isn't something that can be categorized as a CTC program or Chris Reed's computer science program. They're not programs like that where we're able to say this is what we have let's bring other students into that. It would have to be something that would fall under that CTC umbrella for us to be able to advertise it, market it, and bring students from other school districts in. The challenge with that is BCTC has such a robust great catalog, as it were, that really ag is the only area that they do not have that we're then able to do so.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
It does.
Any other discussion?
Could we eventually get to the point that we have well, the buses already have GPS, but can we get to the point that the local people have an app and we can track the bus ourselves?
Yeah, we actually talked about that with the company. They're much more open to it than what the former owner was, and they have implemented it in other school districts already. So we're trying to get. They actually haven't taken over the ownership of the company yet, so they're still through that process. We're trying to make sure the drivers are squared away, but that has already been a discussion point for the future. We're in the works. Yeah, it's not going to happen right away, but they're not opposed to it, and there's already been a discussion point. Yep, good question.
Hearing that point that you just made about the contract or legality of the business ownership is still in limbo. Does that put us at risk at the beginning of the school year? If there were an incident, would we get into a situation where it's a pointing the finger?
By the time the school year starts, it will have transitioned.
Okay, so there's a clear target date, and that is before the school year starts, which is in 7 business days.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Ms. Kleinfelter, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Ham,
Yes.
Mr. Rightower,
Yes.
Mr. Sheets,
Yep.
Mr. Stubitz,
Yes.
Mr. Honchel,
Yes.
Mrs. Eisenhart,
Yes.
6 yeas, motion passes.
The superintendent's report. May I have a motion and a second, please?
Motion right now.
You're on a roll.
Second students.
You're on a roll. A couple of items under the superintendent report this evening. Not too many from numerical, but some heavy ones. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes going through. We have our district goals that are in here. That's linked at the very top as kind of a presentation piece, which I'll go through now, but it's also linked under item E as an approval. That is linked in a one-pager. I will share that is a much deeper document. Mrs. Eisenhart had a chance, and I had a chance to go through that. We have a multi-page Gantt chart that kind of spells out. So if you take the first one, develop and implement outreach strategies to better connect with the broader community. There's a whole host of other things that fall under that then are assigned to different individuals within the school district to make sure we're accomplishing that goal. So there's a lot of detail that goes into this. This was primarily driven from our strategic planning process, which carries us through 2026. So that's kind of the outline of it. From I do this every year, but just from an outline perspective, there are 5 categories. We have the first one, which is that light gray communication goal. We have a big bucket of instructional goal. We have a big bucket of safe and learning environment goal in this blue. We have a connecting, engaging and connections, like connecting with our communities goal essentially. And then this one, which is our facilities and resources goal. So those are our kind of the main buckets that we have for our goals. And again, each one of those sub bullets within that big bucket has additional sub bullets that go along with it. I had a really neat opportunity this year to work with our administrative team, and we broke down from that perspective down to the Gantt chart and all those little goals, and really spent some time talking about high level, where do we want the district going? What are people saying about the school district? What's our vision as an admin team? And then kind of filtered it down to this, and then got to a point of talking about, okay, so here's our goal. What are the barriers to that goal? Who needs to be involved in that goal? Are there cross connections or cross communication that has to happen between different administrators or departments to be able to make that work? And so we spent our administrative retreat doing that the second day, just breaking down the individual goals by building the department and having cross connections and doing some work together as a team first, those big high level conversations, and then more intimately at that building or department level. So that was very useful, and it really set us on a great stage for our goals getting into this year. I feel like we are probably in the best place we have ever been at the end of a summer, ramping up for the school year with a goal process like this. There's a lot in here. Obviously, you can look at that as I read, but some of the big things I just want to talk about, our district newsletter, we want to continue enhancing that. Mrs. Kleinfelter is really the driver behind the newsletter. She coordinates it, she designs it, she sets it up, she pulls in the different articles from the different key players that are involved in that. We're going to switch from FlipSnack to Canva, and the reason for that is FlipSnack was great from a digital perspective. It was a 2-page, it looked awesome, but when we tried to print it, it was really choppy. And so we're going to switch to Canva to make it a little bit more user-friendly from a print side. Kind of sounds odd that we're going back to print, but our goal on that is that community connections side of it. And we want to get these out into the local businesses, whether it's the Jack Steiner or it's the Market Cafe or it's our local churches. We actually tried to do this as a pilot during the May elections. So we went to all the townships, and then during the May elections, put our most recent newsletter as a place on the table as people walked in for elections to be able to grab them. The deeper or the bigger concept here is that we want to connect to the community, not just our parents, but to the broader community, our taxpayers, to make sure everyone knows the great things that are happening within the school district. So that's a lot of things that are behind that one little bullet, but I use that as an example just to share. Here's kind of what's going into the goal process. Another one that I just like to highlight is the Proud. That's our new motto. We used to have something called Pulse, or we're switching that to be BHASD Proud. And that actually links to the second column when you look at that K-12 MTSS for behavior and SEL. So we have a MTSS, or an intervention process plan, that is very detailed, data-driven on how we're supporting our students on the academic side. That was fully implemented last year. This year, we're implementing one for the behavior and social emotional learning side to make sure that our teachers are equipped with helping our students on that end of it, as well as then what's that next layer if there's needs additional help beyond the classroom teacher, our guidance counselors, our KU social worker interns, our CI community and school social workers. There's a whole host of other resources that we have that kind of layer in that second layer. And then our third layer would, of course, be getting into more of our school psychologists and getting some supports like that. But that model of that behavior SEL is connected to the Proud concept, and something we're trying to push K-12 as we roll this out this year. So I'm bouncing around a little bit, but a lot of these are interconnected. Another one in that first column just to talk about is the district branding. Again, Mrs. Kleinfelder has been really the lead for that. She's been working with all the administrators, working with Mr. Wetzel to look at district branding, things like what you see on the right here. Over there, we're looking to update banners and more temporary things that are in the different buildings, the high school, the middle school, the elementary, that were never really updated. And so she's spending a lot of time on that. One of the things you'll see at the high school is there are a lot of really nice light posts that go around, and we're going to put new signage on those light posts. That there's old signage that's been there for many years, starting to get tattered, not looking good. And so she's really led that charge to make that look more inviting and kind of brand our high school into that. 2 pre-K counts programs. Again, thank you to everyone for your support on that. Obviously, the budget was approved. We received a grant for both programs, and so we will not need to use any of those district funds to be able to start the program this year. But your leap of faith and your understanding of the importance for early childhood education is amazing, and obviously resounded with your vote of pulling that off this year. So really excited about getting that going this year. In the safe and supportive learning environment, just a couple of quick ones to highlight there. We're in the process right now of doing exterior door sensors with the cameras that are connected to it. That was intended to be done this summer. It got a little bit delayed just because it was hard to find electricians to be able to come in and run the wiring. So we're still in the process. That will be done by the end of this month. Hopefully, that's kind of the target. We're still looking, we're pushing hard to get that done. All the networking cables and those things are run for the most part. It's just more the physical connections with it with the electric side of it now, and that needs a separate subcontractor to do that. We're also implementing vape detection sensors in the high school bathrooms. They'll in the locker room, and there'll be a camera. We can't put cameras in the bathrooms, obviously, but there's cameras at the bathroom, so we can see who's going in and out. So if that vape detector does go off, we can see who was in the bathroom at that time. So that's another safety piece we're putting in place. I mentioned with the SEL side of it, those social workers. So we're going to have the KU interns for social workers this year. We're going to have one full-time person at the high school, and then we're also going to have 2 at the elementary school. So it's a great resource. It's a nice way to be able to partner with the local university and get extra supports for our students. We also have the communities and schools grant, and so that will continue for this building as well. So those are 2 social worker guidance supports that are going to be for our staff. We are looking to implement the access funding. There's been some back and forth in weekly updates about access. Access is the ability to take reimbursement for events or services for students with special needs that are reimbursable by the federal government. And so there's a lot of rules and regulations and tracking that goes along with that. We were involved in that. We actually got out of that because of all the rules and regulations and tracking. It became so cost hindrance that and the amount of reimbursement dropped so much that it was just paying the secretary that was doing it the time to just do all the tracking. And so it really didn't make sense to continue with the program anymore. Those rates, those reimbursable rates and those reimbursable events, activities have grown. And so now it makes sense for us to reevaluate that. And that's why we're looking to go back into it with a full-time staff member. That's going to be an administrative assistant with Mrs. Kircher in the People Services Department. That's going to track those things, but also be able to pull some money back into the school district. It's all reimbursable, so we don't get the money up front to pay for it. We get it after that activity happens and it comes back to us. But still, it gives us a good chance to, Mrs. Hune, to your point that you talked about several times, is that bring some alternate revenues back into the school district. And it seems that this is the time to go with those reimbursable amounts going up to get back into this. On the engagement side of it, where we have a middle school esports team, we obviously did that kickoff last year with some grants. We're going to be doing that as the high school esports team this year, as those kids kind of progress into high school, growing and developing the high school esports team this year. So that's an exciting growth model. We also, from the athletic standpoint, looking to better communicate our youth programs, connect our youth programs with our high school programs. And then from a standardization side of it, looking to standardize our coach evaluations with our evaluation system that we use for all our staff, as well as creating a handbook with consistent expectations and guidelines for our coaching staff. On the Education Foundation front, they have just been approved as an EITC organization, which means that they can receive donations from businesses that are EITC eligible at the state level. So that's a huge win for the Education Foundation. And there is a meeting tentatively scheduled for this week to look at all the different businesses that the school district interacts with that are on that EITC list. And between Ms. Del Guerico, myself, and some of the members from the Education Foundation, strategically meeting with those key leaders and having conversations about potential donations to the Education Foundation, which obviously just goes back to our programs and our students. The last one on here is one of the probably going to be the most impactful in terms of a change curricularly for our students, and it all surrounds exactly what you were talking about, Mrs. Hune, of the agricultural program. And so we have 3 students that are going to another school district for the ag program at $17,000 a student, and there's a potential of 3 more that are going to be going next year. So those 6 students, we had 1 to 2 evaluate an ag program. We were probably 2 years out from really looking to do that. From a cost perspective, it makes sense to do that now, because if we're just sending money to another school district where we could be developing our own program for the cost that we're already sending students out, and create opportunities for more students to be engaged and want to be part of the ag program. So I know Mr. Farina has really been the key lead to this. you want to share a little bit about what we've done and kind of our philosophy of where we're headed with this?
So we've had a few meetings thus far. We have a representative from PE who was actually local out of the he's one of the state leads for the ag program. And we've had some conversations with potential candidates for positions in neighboring school districts who currently operate an ag program. One of the true benefits that we're seeing, not just that we would be able to bring white students back to the high school to participate in that program, is that this is something that has a wide berth when you look at classes. So for us to be able to run this program, we have to be able to offer a student 1,320 hours worth of agriculture programming throughout their 4 years of high school. So what that ultimately equates out to is about 8 to 10 courses. Okay, so ultimately we would need to create 8 to 10 courses that have that ag focus. And I think for me, one of the true eye-opening pieces of this is when we're talking ag, we're really talking 4 things: plants, animals, food science, and environmental science. So we actually have one of the courses already built. Our AP Environmental Science could be considered an agriculture course. But where I think really the true benefit of this isn't just for these 6 or 7 students who go into a neighboring school district for their ag program, is this opens up a lot of other pathways for students who might be interested in any of those 4 disciplines to maybe take 2 of the 3 classes or 4 of the classes or all of the classes. I think we have a number, just all of my years here as a middle school principal, we had a number of students who were very heavily involved in fishing, and they did a lot of things around here as service projects to build up some benches around some of the local areas where folks fish. There's an ag class on wildlife and forestry. That's something that I think with full students who may not be wanting all 1,320 hours of an ag program, but that would be a good elective for that. If you recall, last school year we had small interest in family consumer science, which led to the elimination of some of those classes at the high school level. However, food science is part of the agriculture program. So we would then be able to offer food science courses, which really focuses on some of those basic family consumer science skills, but puts more of a background on the science of food. So that's called food science, but the science of that to that point. So this really wouldn't just be a program targeted to the 6 or 7 students who want those 1,320 hours, or FFA members, and want to take that to be part of the ag program. This really does apply to a lot of our student body at the high school. The logistics of all of this are where I think this has to be this is something we want to move forward for 24-25. The logistics of this are pretty compelling. So we would need to get CTC approval by the end of May through the state of Pennsylvania. So what that would ultimately be is we would need to have a scope and sequence of those 8 to 10 courses, curriculum built for the scope and sequence of those 8 to 10 courses. We would have to have a dual enrollment agreement with a university that offers post-secondary agriculture accreditation. So again, this would be something that would bolster our dual enrollment courses. And then at the same time, that's May, we would need to have the bulk of this at least firmed out for December. So if we present a program of studies to the board in December, that these courses are able to be included in that program of study, and then come January, February, we're able to roll these options out to our student body for the 24-25 school year. We would need to build out all of the courses at once, but most likely in that first year, we would run the introductory courses, because by running the introductory courses, that's what would get a lot of students into the program. And then in 25-26, we would, in a sense, unmothball some of those other courses and offer more offerings around that. One of the really important things that we learned in our conversation with the state is that there's a lot of focus on once students are established in a program, it would be detrimental to take them out of that program. So in moving this forward to be a 24-25 goal as opposed to safe school is if at the end of this year, we have 3 or 4 students who are in middle school who would be interested in pursuing an ag program and would go to an Oldie or a Kutztown. They would go, but then in a year, we would not be able to say, well, we have our own program, you're coming back, because we now have a program. That's frowned upon at the state. So the goal would be, let's establish our own program, bring our student population who's interested now into it, and expand it from there. So it's a quick turnaround, but it is something where we see, one, we are generating revenue for another school district that could easily pay for a staff member. But 2, it's something that I think that, or we believe that our students would find a lot of interest in. And again, does really bolster that dual enrollment presence for our students. So because we were kind of talking before, I know dual enrollment doesn't necessarily monetize us in the community, but it is definitely one of those other points of pride for us that we have far and away more dual enrollment options than most of the school districts in Berks County. And we are really setting up our high school students to potentially have 1 year of college completed before they leave. And in a few years, I think we'll be very close to having associate pathways completed that kids can get out of here with associates. I mean, get out of here the kindest, most gentle.
I think the only other thing you alluded to it is there's 2 philosophies to setting up a program. You can do you take this one step 1, and you build upon it, and then step 2, and you build upon the step 2. We're not looking to do it that way. We're looking to do, you can take, if you're interested and you wanted to do that family consumer science and you're interested in the food science, you can just take the food science class. Or if you really are interested in the animal science, you could just do the animal science or the environmental. So you don't have to take all of them. You don't have to be in 9th grade and then do 10th grade and 11th grade. You can pick and choose as you wish. If you want to do all of them, that's great. That is kind of what Mr. Farina said in terms of creating that pathway and taking a NOCD and being heavily involved in the ag program. You can do that, or you can just do it as electives of what might interest you. So it kind of fits both realms, and it helps to broaden it and create opportunities for all students, not just the select few that are on that pathway. And so we're purposely trying to go down that route. So huge goal. There's some impetus for getting that done, and the reason why we added that goal this year is just because of that financial aspect of it. And so it creates opportunities for kids sooner and helps us financially on that end as well. So
and from that NOCD standpoint, going back to our earlier conversation, that's where that whole CTC piece comes into this. We would be approved almost as a CTC for Apple, and students who would complete those 1,300 hours would then take that NOCD, get that accreditation, just as anybody else would be attending, Reading, Nuremberg, TCU, or BCTC camps in the West. So that's what that would establish us there.
I don't know if now's an okay time just to comment on that quickly, but I think that's really cool. I think the course types that you mentioned have tremendous appeal and are pretty sort of hot concepts in the current market based on just sort of the buzz that I have access to. Sustainability, environmental science, vet science has always been like, how do you accomplish that path through high school? The feedback would be for naive folks like me, there might be benefit in rebranding ag, right? So, when I read about the ag thing at Ole, here's what I'm picturing completely naively. And I understand this is ignorant on my part, but I might not be alone on this, right? I think dairy cows, I think beef steer, and I think corn, fields of corn, right? That when you say ag program, I'm not thinking food science and nutrition and all the food chemistry. I'm not thinking environmental science and sustainability. I'm not thinking vet science. I'm not thinking in that way. And so the course titles that you mentioned are super appealing. Saying the ag program, far less appealing. Again, ignorantly. but just be careful of that. So maybe think in terms of how to brand it in a way that it's not, because we are a rural district, and so it makes sense for us to have, you know, a rural community. But the program would be far broader and more contemporary, perhaps, than an ag program.
And I think to illustrate that point further, because you are spot on, we met with somebody who is in school right now to be an ag teacher. And we said, oh, you know, why don't you come out and see this? Well, let's just talk through a few ideas. And we took her to a space where, you know, we could potentially house this, which would have been the FCS classroom. So well, we would get rid of the kitchens, you know, we would like, well, why would you get rid of the kitchens? Why wouldn't we? So to your point, I think we weren't thinking of all of those avenues either. So I do think that marketing piece of that, you know, is going to be key. For the eyes of the state, it will have to be called an agriculture general program, because that's what the CTC coding is. But the way we market that and the way we refer to it, you know, I think we have a lot of capital.
Yeah. I mean, the food science, nutrition, now that crosses over into sports, sports, like I see all sorts of links, way broader than someone who would ever picture themselves in an ag program.
So that is exciting for us. That's a huge goal. It's a lot of work to get done this year, but I think it is something that is very worth the effort in terms of all those things that why we just outlined it.
So one of the interesting things I wanted to say, and I know you're not done with your review, is just kudos to you for bringing this to us this soon in the year. I mean, I know there's been years in the past where we didn't get this presentation of that year's goals until October, November even. And so it's a big benefit, I think, for everybody to get this now. I am aware, though, that when we just went through a few months ago all these budget meetings and budget discussions, and yep, we talked about the pre-K program, and yep, we talked about birth to 5 years old, and we said we're engaged in that and we're going to fund that. This program was not in any of those discussions. So not a criticism in any way, just an observation. And like, ooh, do you need funding? Because this is a cool program, but it's not in our budget, I feel certain.
Yeah, it's not.
So do you need funding for it?
Now, no.
Okay.
We will need to talk about that in the budget process to implement.
Next year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we'll have to look at hire a staff member and do some of those pieces to be able to get the program up and running supply wise.
Thank you for your hard work on it.
So the last column, the maroon column, just some real quick things from a technology side, upgrading network switches, upgraded servers, upgrading access points, all that like background to make everything work technology wise is being upgraded this year. And Mrs. Connect is doing a phenomenal job of pulling that all together and leading the tech department. So she's corralling tech folks and learning that role really quickly and doing a phenomenal job. And kudos to running the great program right today. We also have a middle school stadium sound system we're looking to implement for this fall season as a minor upgrade there. Obviously, the final phase of the facility enhancements, which is the athletic fields. And then we have the, which you heard about already. And then we also are working on a multi-year district-wide plan. So we do have funds set aside for improvements, capital improvements. And so that is a way we walk through the entire facility. Everything from this needs paint to we need new HVAC system in this area. Everything is in that plan to be able to help us identify and create a level funding plan to be able to upgrade and keep our facilities in check. So those are the big things. There's obviously a lot more. I spent a lot of time on that, and I apologize, but it's exciting. There's a lot of great things going on, and I give a lot of credit to Mrs. Eisenhart for helping us kind of guide this process, our administrative team, and Mrs. Hughes, to your point, I'm really excited to be bringing this to you in August, and all the work the admin team did to get to this was really promising. So I hope to be able to continue that process in the future as well. Any questions on that? Okay. Couple other quick programs. We have the student handbooks in here. Those are for each of the buildings. Those with the approval tonight will be released for parents as we start the school year. We have an MOU to create. Sorry, and one thing with the handbooks, I give Mr. Farina a lot of credit on this. He spent time with all the building principals and evaluated the student handbooks and are finding ways to make more consistency across the handbooks K to 12. Obviously, each building has its own uniqueness with the age level and age level appropriate content, but anywhere we can find consistencies or at least a progressional process to that. And then the next phase to that is to create a little bit more pictograph type images for the handbook, just because it's very word heavy. So any way we can kind of liven it up, that's kind of rendition too, but that's what Mr. Farina is working on right now with the principals. The MOU for the music partnership agreement. This is a neat opportunity that came about this summer, and it's allowing our students to go participate in the Kutztown band for their football games. So this isn't to be part of their marching band on a normal basis. We'll still have our marching band, but this will allow our students to go over and play football for Kutztown. So this is allowing our students to go over and play in their pep band during Friday night games, which is a neat opportunity. We already have a couple kids that are interested in doing that. So opens up more doors and creates more opportunities, which is for me what it's all about. Item C is to approve the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. We've talked about this when we were talking about that birth to 5 liaison role. This allows a book a month for a child from birth to 5 years old. So that's what this program is. The funding for this will come at this point through the Rotary. We've already pitched this to our clergy, and there are also local churches that are looking to help fund that in the future as well. So I think this will have continual community buy-in to be able to run this program. We have the guest teacher program, which is always a positive for us in terms of bringing substitutes into the school district. One of the things you may or may not know is this program has been running for a long time. For many years, Mr. Farina would be the guest principal. So they go through a whole program. It's a 2-day program. They run it 4 times a year. And then they have an administrator come, a principal come and give the perspective from the principal of what do you expect from a substitute. They have a teacher come. We would have a teacher go as well. And then we would have a principal go. So we have sponsored that or been part of that for the last, honestly, since I was last 11, 12 years before I was even a superintendent, we got into that. And kind of a point of pride that for that long, Brandywine has been an instrumental part of that program. And now Mr. Ginich, with Mr. Farina's taking a new position, Mr. Ginich is now the principal that goes and gives his perspective from a building principal of what do we expect from a substitute. And we have to find a new teacher because the teacher that was doing it just retired. So we'll find a new teacher and still be part of that process. It's a neat way to give back. And then the last item is we talked about is the goals. From an enrollment perspective, just quick updates there. We have 28 enrollments that occurred over the summer. Out of those 28, 6 are free and reduced lunch, which is about 21.5%. And then only 4 that have IEPs. So that is really good news. Last year we had 60 that moved in over the summer. And very high needs in terms of free and reduced and in terms of IEPs. So to have really low IEP numbers and really low free and reduced numbers is a good thing. We're at 1241 right now in terms of our overall district enrollment. That's going to fluctuate. So what I'd like to do at the September board meeting is to give you a little bit better of a snapshot of where we ended with all the dust settling, moving parts. People are still coming and going as we speak. That's where we are in enrollment.
All right.
So they got.
Any board discussion?
I had a follow-up question, Mr. Pottinger. You mentioned the access thing and you talked about how now's a good time for a variety of reasons to re-engage in that program and to staff with the secretary or the administrative assistant. Do you have a target for revenue from that program? Like, what are we talking about dollar-wise?
I'm looking to Nicole.
Yeah, so when Mandy and I looked at it preliminary, and it was very preliminary, we could probably hit around $100,000 reimbursement. Again, that depends on the amount of students, the students that participate. But that was a rough ballpark. you know, obviously it could be a little bit more, but that's kind of where we're at. So.
That's a nice number, 6 figures. So I'd ask that you keep the board posted quarterly, half a year, whatever the appropriate time frame would be, how we're doing. Yeah, in terms of that bogey.
Anything else?
Can you tell us what our poverty? Did that change? Did that fluctuate?
Give me 1 second.
The budget that we're getting free breakfast. Are we still doing free lunch on Friday?
There will not be free lunch on Friday this year, but free breakfast.
That was through the Education
It was through the Education Foundation that the free lunch Fridays came from that. If we did it as a district, it would be a, I don't know what the number would be, but it would be very costly. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Our poverty right now is at 34%. Yeah, it was about that at the end of the year. I'm going to say like 32-ish, 33, but 33.96. And our students with IEPs is at 26% right now.
Any other board discussion? Mrs. Kleinfelter, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Reitner,
Yes.
Mr. Sheets?
Yes.
Mr. Tibbetts?
Yes.
Mr. Hohenschel?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mrs. Eisenhart?
Yes.
6 yeas, motion passes.
And moving on to the personnel report, we have a motion and a second, please.
Motion right now.
Second,
There we go. A few items on our personnel report. So obviously a lot of moving parts that happened over the summer with hires and transitions and things like that. Again, I thank the board for allowing us to make those hires and extend the offers with some retroactive approvals that are going to happen this evening. So that is so helpful. We have really secured a lot of people by allowing us to make those, extend those offers over the summer. I can't tell you how much that helps. So thank you. We have some resignations and changes in the athletic coaches. That is part of the resignation. We have the resignation of a food service cafeteria worker, a separation of employment for 2 nurse substitutes that really went through the process, were approved, but never kind of finalized and never worked for the school district. We have the resignation of Mr. Moore, who's our supervisor of financial services. That was effective last Friday. We're working to fill that position and really evaluate the best way to utilize existing staff and come up with an organizational structure for that role right now. That's a pretty critical one. It's really Ms. Delguerico's right-hand person. So we really need a capable person to be able to be in that role or a process for that. So Ms. Delguerico and I are kind of looking and formulating a bunch of different ideas, looking at different districts to come up with a model that may work a little bit better for us. We'll definitely keep the board apprised of that as we come up with some suggestions. We also have the resignation of Mrs. Moyer. She has been our guidance counselor for the last 2 years using COVID funds. She was able to get a full-time job in another school district. So that's an exciting moment for her, a little bit of a bummer for us, but we're happy that she found that position. Under B, we have a change of staff. This is for Mr. Strohecker, who was our 6th grade math teacher, to go to 5th grade. That's going to be effective for this year. And that is primarily because we have less students going into 6th grade, so we had to reduce a teacher in that grade level, which caused the shift here. We have the support staff. We have the change of assignment from Mrs. Sibley. She was the 10-month intermediate and middle school secretary. She's now going to be taking over that access position we've been talking about this evening. And then we have Mrs. Kowaleski. It's really a change in title, but she was transportation and food service, and then she went to do transportation and athletics. And then we moved her back over, and she was doing transportation. And when we made that transition almost at the same time, there was a food service opening, and so with the transition into a new transportation company and her comfort level, she felt she could pick up the food service role again. And so we're looking to combine those two roles. And again, Mrs. Kowaleski was instrumental in helping with that and willing to do both those roles, which we thank her for that. Some appointments. We have a new chemistry teacher at the high school. She's coming to us from a school district in New Jersey. Lives in the area and was community, and so we're really excited to be bringing her into the school district and filling a need that would otherwise be very hard to fill, and she'll be a great addition to the school. We have the appointment of a replacement for our middle school guidance counselor. This is a replacement for Mr. Schumacher, who had been with us for several years. So we have a new guidance counselor in the middle school, Mrs. Seidel. We also have some support staff additions here. We have Mrs. Soden, who will be a food service worker for us. We have the appointment of Ms. Pottinger to be working as a student worker over the summer. The reason this one is off cycle with the other student workers that we have. So we had 11 student workers and then 3 students that helped painting this summer. Because of her birthday and starting, that's why it came in later and not in conjunction with the other hires in June. So that's why it's a midsummer one. We have a long-term substitute approval, and that's Miss Capalella. She will be filling in for the high school English teacher who's on maternity leave. Just so you know, from a substitute perspective, we have still one position open. That is a half-time music position for this building, the intermediate middle school. There currently are 3 candidates, and Mr. Riggins is going to be doing those interviews this week to see if hopefully we can get a viable candidate to fill that role. Also going into the school year, we have 30 substitutes from STS that are going to be able to be day-to-day subs helping us out. There's also co-curricular appointments for our fall athletic coaches. We still have a couple vacancies that are out there. Mrs. Conrad and her staff have put out messages to the community, and we're looking to still actively fill that. That's a middle school girls soccer assistant. It's a high school golf assistant. We also have some other cheerleading, high school cheerleading assistant is the other one that's still open. So we're working to fill those, and we'll continue to push and advertise for that through social media as well as school district messages. We have support staff substitutes, a few substitutes that are on this list for consideration and approval. We also have some personnel items in terms of our staff, our existing staff that are looking to be mentors for our new staff we just talked about. And so we thank those 3 teachers that serve as mentors. We just had induction last Thursday. And so all those staff that are new, all those mentors that are there were brought together. Mrs. Connector ran a great induction program. Spent a lot of time in the morning going through district philosophy and who we are as a school district. And then in the afternoon, spent more time partnering our teachers together and doing more building level and classroom level items in that afternoon. So good job, Carly, on that aspect of it. We have the ratification of Mrs. Seidel, who is the guidance counselor you're just hiring, who normally Mr. Schumacher would have 2 days to work over the summer to get ready for the start of the school year. So we're asking for that to be continued for Ms. Seidel to help the middle school get ready. We have the approval of all our professional staff to serve as homebound instructors. So basically, this is just the blanket approval. If a student is medically injured and is not able to come to school, they qualify for homebound education. To do that, we go into the house and teach the student. This is a blanket approval. It just allows any of our staff, depending on the grade level, depending on the subject, for someone to be able to go and do that if that would come about. It doesn't happen regularly, but it does happen occasionally. So it's a process we got into a few years ago and works pretty well. And so we asked for that approval. We have the approval of the nurse rates. The reason that this is on here is last December, you approved to adjust the starting rates to $25 an hour in December. When we went and did the approvals for all the starting rates in June, we looked at last June's, that was $18 an hour, and inadvertently put $18 an hour in for this past June at approval. So we're looking to basically go back and say, we already did 25. This is just correcting the mistake that was made at the June meeting. So sorry about that. But this should be the rate for our nurses, the $25 an hour. And that is all the personnel items.
Any board discussion?
The item that you just mentioned, Mr. Pottinger, was there impact on the nursing staff members? Or was it just a board documentation issue?
A board documentation issue, because
Okay, so they were still paid 25 during those 6 months.
I got a concern, I'm not even sure if this really goes with this, but last school year when we had a gentleman coaching our volleyball team, it just gives me, it gives me a concern.
So from a background check perspective, that goes through the state process, and once those background checks are done, that allows us to obviously hire someone. On occasions, we will do contingency hires with their sign off that there is no issues or that they have not had any violations. We're taking their word for it because we don't have that background check. I can share that the state has moved to a different provider, and those background checks are happening quicker. There's still a potential of we need someone right now, and the background check hasn't come in, and so we might have 1 out of 3. Like there's a child abuse, there's a criminal background, and then there's an FBI fingerprint. We might have 1 or 2 of them because some of them are instantaneous. That we would then have that person sign a waiver saying they have never done anything wrong. It's arrest and conviction form is what they fill out.
So it's actually out of our hands. There's no way we can speed up the process. That's the state.
It's completely state driven. Yeah.
However, to your concern, we could create a process or procedure whereby we do not jump the gun.
Good.
Right? We could say that we will not proceed with a candidate until all 3 of the necessary and required background checks have been received in our possession.
We absolutely could do that. Just know if we do that, there's going to be times when it impacts students or program, and we would not be able to run a sports team or a club or something along those lines. Yeah, parent volunteers are allowed to use that for like a one time. They come in like 1 day out of the year. It's not like they're going to be a recurring volunteer. They just come in like a once off.
So the trade-off is risk
Yep.
versus practicality, right? And so, 1 out of how many times did we allow that to happen? Probably 15 or 20 or 30. It sounds like you're suggesting, and 1 was unfortunate. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's a valid concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
On both sides, right? You
Right.
don't want positions not being filled. You don't want parents on a special day for a child not to be able to attend and support their kid in the classroom.
Yeah.
By the same token, we absolutely are at huge risk when we find out after the fact that those clearances didn't pass. And so we exposed a team of kids or a classroom of kids to someone we absolutely would not want interacting with our children. And we're making that decision on behalf of all the parents, and they don't know that we're bypassing that requirement. So one of the things in my mind perhaps we should do is, if and when we continue to decide to do that, to allow people in without the appropriate clearances, is to notify, to say there's going to be a guest and that guest has not passed all the clearances yet, and allow folks to make decisions on their own. Well, I don't want my kid around that person, or sure, I have no problem with that. I put my trust in your hands.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to skin the cat, but I think you have a valid concern.
Are we liable if something happens?
You bet we are, right?
That's the, well, not.
Hold on. Understand something. First of all, the law allows you, you're not bypassing anything. The law allows you to make exceptions as long as they sign certain documents indicating that they do not believe that they have inappropriate background. A lot of times in these situations, people don't realize what they might have done a couple of years ago might be in violation of the law. So you're not bypassing anything. The law allows you to give you that exception. So I want to make sure that's clear. There's no bypassing of any laws. The liability, you have to understand something. As long as you're doing it and having them fill out the forms, your liability is de minimis because of the fact that you are protected under the law, under the Political Subdivision Trust Claim Act in regard to your liability for certain things. If you do not go through the process, then yes, your liability, you would have the liability. But if you are going through what they allow you to do, your liability is de minimis at that point in time. So I just want to make sure that that's clear in that regard, that we're not doing anything wrong. I don't want anyone in the public to think that's going on. It's just that you're allowed to have those exceptions. You're right. It's not, it is a chance, but the fact of the matter is that is allowable under the law for you to do, if so desired.
And that is the process. And those are the forms that when I talk about those arrest and conviction forms, that's the process that we are following.
I appreciate Mr. Pratt, you sharing that. I think we've also need to be eyes wide open in terms of the way lawsuits work. And while we protect ourselves as best we can, if there was a child that was injured and a family brought a lawsuit against us, we would go to bat and say, the form was signed, the person told us they were good, all that stuff. And the reality is the district would probably end up settling that lawsuit because we wouldn't want to take it to court because fighting it would cost so much more than settling. And that's sad to have to say, and it probably is a bigger picture topic, but there is financial risk to the district. We just, as board members, need to be honest and open about that.
There is your deductible for your insurance that covers you on these situations. That would be the main financial impact that you have. That's why you have the insurance.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
So where do we land on that? Like, will there be any change? Like, are you asking the board, the administration to make a change, or
Do we want to notify these companies or?
At this point, I'm not looking to make a change unless you would like me to as a board. And if you like me to, I think we have to be very careful of the wording because to Mr. Pratt's point, it's not like we are bypassing any law. We are following the process.
My only concern would be if you're doing that for someone to come in, now we have potential for defamation, libel, and slander, which you're not protected for. And so that would put Mr. Pottinger or any of the administration who sends that out into a position that they may be, that might be something that you're insinuating, and that's not what you would want to do in those matters. Be very careful in that situation.
I agree. I think we have good protocols in place currently, and those allowed us to protect ourselves. I think without the rest of the board here too, this is a big topic.
So is there a possibility that the board would be notified if in the situation where the administration is making a decision to not follow that super strict protocol and to proceed with a candidate pending clearances? Could you notify the board?
But they did not follow protocol.
Mr. Potter.
Yes.
So quick question. In the future, we have been notified, and it is actually listed if the background checks are still in process, correct?
On the board agenda, yes, they are.
So that's something that's already done, and we're not not following the protocol, correct?
That's correct.
So at this time, I mean, realistically, it doesn't really sound like there's anything more that we need to do. You know, there are situations where at times, you know, like Mr. Pratt said, someone might not understand that this was not something that this was not an issue that they had that would allow them to gain employment in this career field. You know, so unless we're going to create policies trying to, you know, hit any and every possible worst case scenario eventuality, it doesn't really sound like there's anything more we can do. Is that correct?
From my perspective, I do not believe there is. I think we're following the policy, we're following the procedure, we're following the law of what is permissible. I want to make sure we're clear as a board, and from what our perspective, I'm a stickler on the clearances and safety. I really go through that process, and we've established guidelines within the organization where if there's like, hey, what are we doing with this? I will follow that, and gray areas are always on the safety side. If we end up using the arrest and conviction form, which is part of the process, that individual is never alone with kids. They're with another adult. They're with someone that already has the background clearances. So there's a lot of safety pieces that are put in place just to be sure that we are notifying the board with pending the clearances, or in those internal discussions behind the scenes. We're always doing the clearances or doing the pieces that we need to make sure that we're following the law.
So I don't know that either Mr. Rightnow nor I are suggesting that we are not following the law. That is absolutely not what I am saying. But I think it is a little confusing if we're not acknowledging that we have a procedure in place, that we require 3 clearances, and at least one instance, and in fact, it sounds like it wasn't an isolated instance where we make exceptions to our policy that
It wasn't an isolated incident.
Mr. Pottinger indicated that allowing an individual to proceed with accepting an opportunity and interacting with our children before 3 things have cleared, that's an exception to our practice and our policy, correct? Our internal rule says you need to pass your clearances to get in front of kids. We consciously made a decision that the board was only aware of by a little Y or an N on the sports document, on the co-curricular document, to proceed without those 3 clearance checkbox being checked. Correct?
No.
Okay, well then clarify again.
The piece that you're missing is you're putting the 3 buckets together. I think that's what Mr. Pratt tried to explain. There's these 3 buckets of 3 clearances. There's a 4th one that is also an acceptable clearance to allow an employee or a visitor to come in and work with students while these other 3 are pending. So we followed our guideline. When you say we haven't followed our process or our guidelines, we absolutely have.
So you can essentially sign that 4th one saying that I attest that I have no background, that everything is clear. And then during that short interim time, while we have record that you have applied for these clearances, then essentially you have done your due diligence and that we're simply waiting on the state. This is what we use during that interim, during that, say, 2-week time frame, 3-week time frame, whatever.
Right. So then to Mr. Sheets's question, there clearly could be a situation where we change our policy or our practice to require the 4th thing to come in as fully approved, rather than relying on the individual candidate's verbal and written commitment that it's clear. We could do that if the board chose to.
Yeah.
So to say that there's nothing more we can do, there's absolutely, we could get tighter on it. It sounds like you're.
Well, yeah, we had talked about that already. And that's where you said there's the practicality versus the risk. The risk side of it is, okay, you take away the arrest conviction form, and we're going to mandate that you have to have all 3 of these clearances before you're allowed to walk through the door. the practicality side is you're going to take away opportunities from kids.
So I think what I'm interested in is trying to better understand how often does this happen and what would the impact, quantify the risk. How many positions would remain open? How many kids would be impacted? How often does this happen? Or was it really just an isolated incident? It was never positioned as an oops. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision to go forward for the reasons you're saying, because we, as a district, as an administrative team, you guys made a decision to say that this is worth the risk. Let's go forward with this candidate because they told us they're clean.
Right.
Or they're okay. And so we did that. And it sounds like we do that from time to time. So what I think I'm hearing Matt and I say is, gosh, didn't quite realize that as a board member. Could we get a little more information about if we're going to continue to do that? What are we talking about? A handful of coaches, a handful of volunteer moms and dads? Like, what exactly is the quantification of the risk? Because we know what the impact on the other side could be. Like, oh my gosh, the likelihood of it happening is slim to none. But shoot, if it ever happened, it would be very uncomfortable for the district and terrible for a family.
Yes, we can
Just
we can
quantify it for us a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I had one other.
Do we want to put that on the agenda for next month to discuss that more?
I'll pull the numbers and share the numbers with you.
Policy committee.
Let me run it that way. I put it.
Just the one other thing. So there's a resignation in the business office. Do we, and it seems like it was a little bit sudden since it's effective just last Friday. Do you want to talk just briefly about a game plan short term for Ms. Del Guerico? Because obviously you acknowledged it's a critical piece to the puzzle. And we know you're working on the longer term strategy. Fine. Short term, are we okay? Do we have any holes we need to fill?
Right now,
plugs.
You can speak to it better than I can, but right now we're using internal staff to build capacity and fill some of those voids, as well as Mr. Walker's picking up some of the load right now to just keep us afloat and patch the holes.
Yeah, so essentially the conversation came up, do we simply just want to repost, but with the history of the position as is, I think we wanted to take some time and really sit back and say, what's the long-term plan versus essentially just seeing what candidates are out there and hiring the best one out of that current applicant pool. So in the meantime, I think we're confident as an office, obviously with fellow administration being on board as well, that we can kind of bridge the gap temporarily.
And the nice part is there's a lot of depth within the office that Ms. Douglas has been able to grow. That people that have risen up through that process are able to pick up some of that historically they maybe didn't or didn't know they had the ability to do that. And so it's neat to be able to see that.
All right.
So can I make a motion just to discuss it more in the next meeting? Or how do we go about it? I'm not saying make any ruling or anything, just to talk about it more.
You can always bring it up in board discussion after the motion. There's board discussion for any time, so you can always bring that up during board discussion. Okay.
Anything else? Ms. Kleinfelter, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sheets,
Yes.
Mr. Hohenschel,
Yes.
Mrs. Hume,
Yes.
Mr. Reiner,
Yes.
Mr. Schubitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Eisenhart,
Yes.
6 yeas, motion passes.
Other business, any public comment or board discussion to further tonight's meeting? Anything else? I will make an adjournment, a motion and a second for an adjournment, please.
Motion right there.
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone. Tomorrow's a big day. We start back with all our staff.